Hello, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. My name is Phoenix. To the elite members, thank you so much for your love and dedication. I deeply and humbly appreciate it. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. For once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person every day. So, sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of Vocal Melatonin entitled True Backwood Creepy Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. The summer sun hung low over the jagged pines like a bloodshot eye, reluctant to close even as the world below it stretched into shadow. It was the year I clawed my way out of university, diploma in hand, like a juju against the mundane grind ahead. And my father, ever the stoic fisherman, his face etched with the quiet lines of a man who'd spent too many dawns chasing ghosts in the water, decided we deserved a ritual. A baptism in solitude, he called it. We'd head to Logan Lake, or what passed for it, in those forgotten corners of the municipality. A nameless tarn cradled in the folds of the Cascades, accessible only by a rutted logging road that clawed its way through the underbrush, like veins pulsing with sap and secrets. No families here, no picnic blankets or squealing kids, just the kind of place where the map blurred at the edges, and the air tasted of pine resin and something sharper, like damp earth turned over too soon. We rattled up that road in his old Ford, the tires spitting gravel like accusations, the engine's growl the only sound daring to pierce the cathedral silence of the woods. I remember the way the trees leaned in as we drove, their branches interlocking overhead in a lattice that filtered the light into sickly green veins on the dashboard. Father hummed an old tune under his breath, something about blue bays and silver salmon. But even then, I felt the first goosebumps at the base of my skull. Not fear, not yet. Just the awareness that we'd crossed some invisible threshold where the world we left behind couldn't follow. The lake emerged from the mist like a bruise on the landscape. Still, ink black in its shallows, ringed by boulders that squatted like ancient protectors. No dock, no signposts, just us, our rods and the whisper of water lapping at the shore as if tasting the air for intruders. We set up camp with the efficiency of men who'd done this dance 100 times. Tent pitched on a flat of needle-strewn moss. Fire pit ringed with stones that looked too deliberately placed, like the work of hands long rotted away. The air was crisp, laced with the metallic tang of high altitude, but beneath it lurked something else, a faint rot, like meat left too long in the sun. I dismissed it as imagination, the overeager fancy of a kid fresh from lectures on folklore and forgotten gods. Father cracked a beer, his laugh booming across the water. "This is it, son. The gods of the deep are smiling today." And they were, in their merciless way. We launched the canoe around 4, the sun dipping toward the peaks like it knew something we didn't. The shallows were crystal clear, 4 to 6 feet of glassy deception, where the lake bed undulated like the spine of some submerged beast. We trolled with pumpkinhead flies, those gaudy lures that mimic dying minnows in their death throes, and the fish rose like offerings from the abyss. Every 5 minutes, a strike, a silver flash, a rod bending like a spine in agony, line sinking through the guides. They were small things, 12 to 16 inches of sleek fury, body slim, eyes like polished obsidian that seemed to fix on you with accusatory gleam. Feisty didn't cover it. They fought with a desperation of creatures that knew the hook was just the beginning of a longer unraveling. Father and I tallied 25 apiece by dusk, our hands slick with scales and the faint, coppery scent of blood. The 2-weight rods, those whisper-thin wads we packed on a whim, bent and quivered like they were alive, protesting the insult of such bounty. We kept a few, their flanks marbled with fat that promised succulence over the coals. But the rest we released, watching them dart back into the murk with a flick of tail that sent ripples radiating like warnings. The lake drank them down greedily, the surface closing over each one without a trace. As the sky bled into twilight, we fried our catch, the sizzle mingling with the pop of embers, the flesh flaking white and tender on our tongues. It tasted of secrets, clean, wild, with an undercurrent of something brackish, like the water had seeped into their bones and flavored them from within. We ate in silence, the fire's glow casting long shadows that danced on the tent walls like specters at a feast. Father raised his fork like a toast. To endings and beginnings. I nodded, but my eyes kept straying to the tree line, where the darkness pooled thicker than it should, as if the woods were exhaling something ancient and watchful. The second day dawned with a false promise of normalcy. Mist clung to the water like a shroud, burning off slowly under a sun that felt feebler, less committed. We fished as men do, methodical casts into the deeper channels, where the light fractured and the bottom fell away into abyssal blue. The frenzy of yesterday had ebbed. The lake had remembered its composure. 4 fish each, over the long hours. 2 rainbow trout with bars like prison stripes. 2 more of those slime phantoms that fought less fiercely now, as if weary of the game. We cleaned them by the shore, knives flashing in the diffused light, guts spilling onto the rocks in glistening coils that the flies descended upon in a black buzzing horde. Lunch was the last of our catch, grilled with salt and lemon that couldn't quite mask the faint muddy aftertaste, followed by hot dogs charred black over the rekindled fire. Father's stories filled the air, tales of bigger hauls and younger days, of storms that swallowed boats whole. But my laughs came slower, hollowed out by the weight of the silence beyond our voices. The lake was too still, its surface a mirror that reflected nothing but the inverted pines, their roots clawing downward into depths we couldn't fathom. As evening bled into night, we crawled into the tent, the nylon walls sagging like flayed skin under the weight of dew. Father popped in his earplugs, a ritual against the night's symphony of snaps and sighs, his snores rumbling to life almost immediately. A freight train through the dark. I laid there, staring at that mesh ceiling where moonlight filtered through in pallid threads, my body heavy with the ache of a day bent over rods. Sleep came in fits, shallow and laced with dreams of silver scales glinting in underwater caverns, of voices murmuring just beyond hearing. Then, around 2, though my watch would later confirm it, frozen at that witching hour, I jolted awake, not with a start, but with the sharp clarity of a blade drawn across the throat. My heart hammered, not from nightmare, but from an alertness so profound it bordered on pain, every nerve alight as if I'd been dipped into frost. Irritation flickered first. God, not now. Not this insomnia that would chain me to the dark until dawn. I shifted on my pad, the rustle of my bag loud as a gunshot in the cocoon of the tent. But then it came, a slow, childlike babbling seeping through the canvas from the lakeside, just beyond the zipper's frail barrier. Soft at first, like the coo of an infant stirring in its cradle, but drawn out, elongated into syllables that twisted and coiled like smoke from a poisoned fire. Ah, ooh, hey. Not words, not quite gibberish spun from the ether, a patois of the unborn or the unburied. Yet it carried weight, insistence, as if the speaker were pressing against the veil of reality, fingers splayed on the other side, begging entry. Primal fear ballooned in my gut then, a cold bloom that rooted me to the spot. I couldn't move, couldn't even draw breath without the terror of shattering the fragile hush. My limbs turned to lead, pinned by an instinct older than reason, whispering that to stir was to invite it closer. The babbling persisted, rhythmic now, insistent as a heartbeat echoing from a grave. It wasn't pleading for mercy. No, this was demand, a frustrated entreaty from something small and denied, like a babe wailing for milk that would never come, its cry sharpening. Why won't you feed me? Why do you turn away? Or a cat's meowing at the door, but warped, stretched into something that clawed at the edges of comprehension. It sounded like a child. Yes, high, reedy, pitched with the innocence of unformed lungs, but wrong. Profoundly, cosmically wrong. The vowels dragged like hooks through flesh. The constants bubbled as if gargled in bile. Not from this world. This voice. It slithered up from the slit of the lake bed, or perhaps from the marrow of the trees themselves, where roots tangled with things that had never drawn breath above ground. I lay there, sweat licking my skin like 1,000 eyes upon me, the babble weaving patterns that burrowed into my skull. It felt communicative, in the way a spider's web communicates doom to the fly. Not in language I knew. No English, no indigenous tongue I'd glimpsed in books, but an intent raw and unrelenting. A cadence rose and fell, insistent, petrifying, as if it were reciting a litany of grievances, naming signs committed in the shallows. Hooey, The sound invoked images unbidden, pale limbs flailing in dark water, tiny mouths opening and closing in silent screams, eyes milky with the pressure of depths uncharted. I think of it later, years on, when I stumbled into that cursed series, From. The ghoul children with their hollow cheeks and gibbering chants. Those same warped echoes. Cooey, slithering from their lipless grins. But that night, it was fresh, unfiltered horror, the kind that hollows you out and fills the void with whispers. How long did it last? Time fractured, minutes stretching into eternities where the only reality was that voice, circling the tent like a predator, scenting blood. I paused once, as if listening. Did it hear my pulse thundering like war drums? Did it sense the quiver in my throat, the prayer I dared not voice? Then it resumed, closer now, the words brushing the fabric as if lips pursed against it, breath fogging the weave, I imagined it there, small, sodden, form crouched in ferns, skin translucent as a drowned thing's, eyes like the fish we'd hooked, accusatory, eternal. What did it want? Not my life. Not yet. Something subtler. A tethering. A compact sealed in the dark. To be heard. To be fed. To drag me into its babble until my own voice joined the chorus from the depths. And then, as abruptly as it began, it ceased. Silence crashed down like a guillotine, absolute and suffocating. The lake held its breath. Even the crickets had fled. Exhaustion claimed me then, not the gentle pull of sleep, but a forcible dragging under, as if the voice had laced its final syllable with oblivion, a soporific spell woven from the ether. I plummeted into the darkness, dreamless and profound, waking only as the first gray lights seeped through the mesh, my body stiff as if I'd been bound all night. Father stirred me, oblivious, yawning around his coffee mug. "Sleep like the dead, eh? What's at the water?" I nodded, throat dry as grave dust, words failing me. We stayed that final night against the howl of better judgment, stubbornness, or perhaps the subtle pull of that voice, urging us to linger. Nothing stirred after dusk. The woods were unnaturally still. The fire's crackle, a lone heartbeat in the void. Fishing dragged to average. A few strikes, releases that felt like offerings now. The fish vanishing into the gloom with less fight, as if sated. On the last morning, as we packed amid the desultory flap of tent flaps, we hooked a handful more, small, spent things that barely thrashed. We let them go, one by one, watching from the canoe as they bend weakly toward freedom. But freedom was a lie that day. Twice, only twice, but etched into my marrow. Loons materialized from the mist, sleek shadows with cries that shattered glass. They dove with predatory grace, surfacing moments later with our released prizes, wriggling in their beaks, throats bulging as they swallowed whole. Their red eyes fixed on us across the water, unblinking, as if in mocking gratitude. Messengers, perhaps, from whatever hunger stirred below, or the babbler's kin come to collect their due. We fled that place as the road unspooled behind us, the lake shrinking in the rear view to a dark smudge on the horizon. Father spoke of returning, of chasing that first day's frenzy again, but I shut it down with excuses. Schedules, studies, the lie of busier waters elsewhere. Truth was, the memory was tainted now, the triumph curdled by that voice's echo, which lingered in quiet moments like a stain. I hear it still, in the hush before sleep, that insistent gibberish coiling through my thoughts. Angui, feed me, stay. We never went back, partly to preserve the illusion of those back-to-back hauls, unmarred by skunkings or worse, but mostly because some doors, once cracked, swing wide on hinges greased with dread. And in the depths of unnamed lakes, things wait, not for lines or lures, but for the sound of your name on their drowned tongues. The frost clung to the bare branches like skeletal fingers, scraping at the gray sky above the hollows of western North Carolina. It's a land that swallows secrets whole, ancient ridges folding over forgotten graves, creeks that murmur lies to anyone foolish enough to listen too closely. I've spent years out there, knee-deep in the muck, chasing ghosts of the past with my metal detector humming like a divining rod for the damned. Arrowheads chipped from the bones of long-dead braves, rusted mini-balls from boys who never made it home from the war, shattered bottles that once held rot-gut whiskey for men with hollow eyes. Relic hunting, they call it. I call it digging up what should stay buried. But the pool is there, always, an itch under my skin that drives me further from the roads, deeper into the throat of the woods where the maples twist like they're trying to choke the light from the world. My name's Jimmy. Yeah, that Jimmy. The one folks in town nod to with a wary half smile, like they know I've seen things that don't sit right. I hit the same creek banks until they're stripped bare, so each trip demands I push farther, into the fringes where the underbrush thickens and the air tastes of damp earth and something sharper. But more often than not, I stumble back to my truck as the sun bleeds out, the detector's whine fading into the cricket chorus that sounds too much like distant laughter. Darkness out here isn't just the absence of light. It's a presence, heavy and patient, waiting for you to blink. This one started ordinary enough, or as ordinary as anything gets in these parts. Winter had clamped down hard, the kind that turns the playground at the edge of town into a ghost yard, swings creaking empty in the wind like hanged men swaying. The creek beside it was a sluggish vein of ice-rimmed water, the sort kids splash into come summer but now just gargles with half-frozen malice. I parked my old Ford at the gravel lot, the engine ticking down like a cooling corpse, and laced up my boots. No one around, not a soul, just the wind hissing through the pines, carrying the faint rot of leaves, long turned to slurry. I waded in, the cold biting through my jeans like teeth, and started upstream, a mile or so, eyes glued to the gravel bed, flipping stones that might hide a flint point or a tarnished spoon from some settler's fever dream. About halfway, I passed that house. God, that house. It squats there by the creek like a tumor on the landscape, peeling clapboard, the color of jaundiced flesh. Windows like empty sockets staring out from under sagging eaves. I've walked by it 100 times, always in daylight, but it's the nights I remember clearest. Lights flickering on after dusk, not the warm glow of hearth fire, but something colder, like foxfire luring prey into the bog. Every pass, I feel it. Eyes on me, heavy as damp soil, peeling back my layers to see the meat underneath. I'd wave without looking, small town reflex, or maybe just to appease whatever crouched behind the glass. Evening, I muttered to the shadows, half expecting a rasp in return. But nothing ever came. Just the weight lifting as I moved on, leaving me hollowed out like it tasted and found me wanting. Today was different. I trudged past without that goosebumps all over my neck, without the sense of breath fogging the pains. The house slumbered, blinds drawn tight, door hanging crooked like a broken jaw. No lights, no eyes. Maybe they'd finally tired of me or moved on to fresher meat. Or maybe, and this thought warmed and slow, like a splinter under the nail, they were waiting for something more intimate. I shook it off, focused on the creek's murmur, the crunch of my boots on submerged pebbles. The water was up to my calves now, tugging at my legs with a persistence that felt almost deliberate, like it wanted to drag me under and hold me there until the silt filled my lungs. I hit the sandbar just as the bend widened, the creek's shallows fanning out under the rusted skeleton of an old bridge. Prime ground. This. Native relics washed down from upstream massacres. Bottles hurled from wagons by men cursing their fates. I slowed, heart quickening in that familiar thrill, the one that borders on hunger. Kneeling in the damp sand, I sifted through it methodically, fingers probing like a blind man reading Braille in the dark. Every glint, every anomaly, a shard of quartz, a fragment of clay, promised revelation. But then it started. That itch again. Not just watch, but known. Like the woods themselves had parted their branches to peer down, cataloging the rhythm of my breath, the pulse in my throat. I straightened, scanning the banks. Nothing. Hundreds of yards of open creek bed in every direction, fringed by leafless oaks that clawed at the sky like supplicants begging for rain that never came. The bridge loomed overhead, its iron girders furred with rust that flaked down in bloody specks. But no footprints marred the sand. No silhouette broke the tree line. Just the wind whispering secrets it wouldn't share. I crouched again, forcing my hands to move, but the feeling gnawed deeper, a pressure behind my eyes, as if something vast and formless was coiling just beyond sight, patient as a spider spinning its web from my own doubts. And then it spoke. "Jimmy." The voice slithered out from the rush of water, low and gravelly, like an old hillbilly's drawl dragged up from a whiskey-soaked grave. Questioning, almost tender, as if the speaker had caught a glimpse of me in some half-remembered nightmare and wasn't quite sure if I was real. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. I whipped around, sand sprang from my knees, expecting, needing to see him. Some grizzled coot in overalls, maybe a neighbor I'd forgotten, standing on the bank a few feet away, close enough that his words could cut through the creek's roar. But the bank was empty, pristine, untouched sand slopping up to the underbrush. Not a boot print, not a shadow. Hundreds of yards of visibility, and I was alone, utterly suffocatingly alone. I froze there, breath fogging in the chill air, ears straining against the sudden silence. The water kept babbling, indifferent, but the voice, it had been so close, inches maybe, warm breath on my neck, the faint wheeze of lungs clogged with damp and regret. "Jimmy." It echoed in my skull, mocking the emptiness. My name, not "Hey boy," or "You there." Jimmy. The name my daddy slurred before he put the barrel in his mouth. The one etched on the dog tags I found tangled in a briar patch last spring. How? Who? The woods didn't tell. The trees leaning in closer, branches intertwining like conspirators. I scanned again, slower this time, heart hammering a rhythm that matched the distant thunderheads rolling in from the Smokies. Nothing. But the air thickened, charged with the scent of wet stone and something fouler. Decay, like meat left in the sun too long. I bolted upright, detector forgotten in the shallows, and scrambled up the bank. Thorns snagged my jeans like grasping fingers, but I did not care. The sandbar that had seemed so inviting now stretched behind me like a trap, the bridge a guillotine waiting to drop. I half ran, half stumbled along the high ground, paralleling the creek bed toward the playground. Every snap of a twig underfoot, a gunshot in my ears. 30 minutes it took. 30 minutes of glancing over my shoulder, of the voice replaying in loops. Each iteration a little more insistent, a little more possessive. Jimmy. Not a question anymore, but a claim. As if whatever had spoken knew me. Not just my name, but the rusted nails in my soul. The nights I'd dreamed of faces pressing against my truck window. The relics I'd unearthed that whispered when I held them too long. By the time I reached my truck, sweat had soaked through my flannel despite the cold, and my hand shook so bad I fumbled the keys twice. The playground was still deserted, the swings swaying in mocking rhythm. But that house, oh Christ, that house. As I peeled out of the lot, gravel spitting like curses, I caught it in the rear view, a flicker in the upstairs window. Not light, exactly. More like the gleam of an eye catching the dying sun. Wet and unblinking, watching me go, or maybe waiting for me to come back. I haven't returned to that stretch of creek. Not yet, anyways. The detector sits in the corner of my garage, gathering dust like a coffin shroud. And every night since, the dreams come. Not of the voice, but of it multiplying. Dozens of them. Hillbilly rasps overlapping in a chorus that knows my every sin, every buried shame. They'll call me from the woods, from the water, from the cracks in the floorboards. And one day, when the hollows grow hungry enough, I'll answer. Because out here, in the belly of these mountains, nothing's ever truly gone. It just waits, patient, knowing your name. The desert has a way of pulling you in, like it's alive, whispering promises of freedom or oblivion in the same breath. For over a decade, I'd answered its call, making my annual tree to Joshua Tree National Park in the spring of 1999. Back then, the world wasn't tethered to glowing screens, no smartphones, no Wi-Fi, no digital maps to guide you when the sand swallowed your path. The roads were barely roads at all, just rutted tracks of dust and gravel that clawed at your tires, daring you to go deeper. Water was a myth inside the park. You filled up at the unmanned entrance stations or you paid the price under a sun that didn't care. Rangers? I never saw one, not once. The place felt like it belonged to something older, something that watched from the shadows of the twisted trees. I'd come from a climbing loop through Utah, Zion's looping cliffs, Archer's Stone Lookout, my annual pass waving me through gates where no one stood guard. That year, Joshua Tree felt different, tainted. Construction crews were ripping into the earth, paving over the wild with asphalt scars and planting signs like headstones for a place that didn't want them. We set up camp, me and my climbing partner, Lena, a theater actress with crimson hair and a laugh that could charm the stars. At a site I can't name now. Ryan? Jumbo Rocks? The memory blurs like heat rising off the sand. Our spot backed up to a cave, a dark hollow in the rock that swallowed the day's heat and held it like a secret. It was shelter from the sun or the rare storms that crept in before dawn, turning the desert to a slick, treacherous trap. The desert draws the lost, the broken, those running from something or toward nothing at all. Charles Manson's Spawn Ranch wasn't far, its ghost still lingering in the air, a reminder that blood stains these sands deeper than time can erase. Bodies vanish out here, swallowed whole, their stories ground to dust. We'd share fires with other campers, trading food and tales under a sky that felt too vast, too cold. But that year, every encounter carried a shadow, a weight that made the air taste sour. We met Chris first, a wiry guy from Virginia. Or was it West Virginia? With eyes that darted like he was waiting for the world to strike. He'd been living in the campground for weeks, pedaling a beat-up bike through the punishing sand to a diner job at one of the park's entrances. 29 Palms? Joshua Tree Town? I don't recall. It all feels like a fever dream now. He was an environmentalist, spitting venom at the construction crews, cursing the signs that pointed tourists to sacred places. "They're gutting it," he'd hiss, admitting in low tones to slashing signs under moonlight, his knife catching the fire's glow like a warning. I didn't agree with his vandalism, but I felt the pulse of his anger. The desert wasn't meant to be tamed. Still, there was something off about him, a relentlessness that made me wonder what else he might cut in the dark. Then there was the woman at the end of the cul-de-sac, a living nightmare woven into the landscape. Her campsite was a shrine to madness, twisted wire figures dangling from branches like hanged men, empty bottles clinking in the wind like bones, trash sculpted into grotesque effigies that seemed to leer. She was wild-eyed, dark hair matted into knots, muttering gibberish, curses or prophecies. I couldn't tell. "The sand knows your name," she'd whisper, her gaze slicing through you like a blade. We avoided her, but her presence clung like damp rot, a stain on the air that made your skin crawl. Next to her sat a white or maybe cream Toyota wagon. Delaware plates crusted with dust, its windows obscured by stacks of banker's boxes, papers spilling out like secrets, trying to escape. Someone lived in that car, breathing its stale air, a ghost in a metal tomb. The roads were treacherous. My Subaru barely managed them. How did that sedan get here? It was a question that festered, unanswered. Its owner was a man, I'll call D. Darren. Andrew something with a D. Although the names eroded like bones in the wind. I've spent years searching online, chasing his shadow through dead-end searches, but he's gone. A specter who left no trace. D was wrong from the start. Dressed in business casual, khakis buttoned down like he'd wandered off a corporate retreat into hell. As a therapist then, I could spot the cracks in people, the masks they wore to hide their rot. D was a walking fracture, his smile too sharp, his eyes too hungry. He claimed he was divorced, finding himself in the desert, a lie so thin it tore under scrutiny. He reeked of control, of cruelty, the kind of man who'd break you and smile while doing it. He slithered into our orbit through Chris, showing up at our fire one night like a snake coiling for warmth. Lena, my social butterfly, shone under attention, her actress charm drawing him in. D deflected every question, turning it back on us with a predator's finesse. "Where do you live?" Work or study? He'd ask, a voice smooth as venom. Lena spilled everything, our addresses, theater gigs, her routines, while I sat frozen, memorizing his scar, his twitching fingers, the cold glint in his eyes. We made a safe word later, mirage. But that night, I was too late to stop her. Dee's gaze devoured her, a wolf circling a lamb, and she didn't see it. I invited them, him and Chris, for spaghetti the next night, a decision that clawed at my gut the moment it left my lips. The next day, Chris was gone. His tent stood empty, bike untouched, like a gravestone. Maybe work, we told ourselves, but dread coiled tighter. Evening fell, and I cooked. The scent of sauce, a fragile anchor against the growing dark. Lena went to fetch Chris. She returned alone, eyes wide. Dee came instead, his backpack slung over his shoulder, its bulk pressing against my nerves like a loaded threat. We asked about Chris. His smile was a blade. He's meeting me later, out on a jeep trail, he said, naming a path deep in the park's black heart. A trail we'd seen a jeep stuck in days before, wheels spinning in futilely. It was no place to walk, not at night, not ever. I agreed to drive, my instincts screaming, but curiosity or stupidity winning out. Lena rode shotgun, Dee behind her, his backpack on his lap like a promise of death. The drive was a descent, the Subaru rattling over ruts that felt like they'd swallow us whole. I kept glancing back, certain I saw the glint of metal in that bag. A gun, a knife, something final. The trail ended in a clearing ringed by jagged rocks, the stars above cold and unyielding. No Chris, no one. Hours from town, cell signals a cruel joke. This is it, Dean said, his voice a low hiss. We hike to him, now. The darkness was absolute, a void that pressed against my eyes, alive with unseen things. My mind painted horrors. Dee pulling a gun, pressing it to Lena's head, forcing me out into the sand where no one would hear the shot. I saw us buried, our bones joining the desert's silent choir. No, I said, my voice cutting through the tension. We're not hiking. You can go. I'm driving back. His eyes flashed with rage, a storm breaking behind them. But he stayed put. The drive back was a silent hell. His anger a weight in the air, my fear a pulse in my throat. Back at camp, Chris's presence was a wound. Dee lingered, wanting to sit by the fire, to keep probing. I lied about sleep, pulling Lena to the tent. In whispers, we agreed. He was dangerous. The backpack held death, gun or worse. We debated running to town, to the police, but what proof? Two countercultural girls, me with purple dreads, Lena with red hair, in a military town? They'd dismiss us, or worse. The construction crew nearby, drunk and loud. Two women alone at night. A different kind of danger. We chose the Subaru. Its blacked-out windows our only shield. Tinted so dark, I'd been sighted across the southwest, pulled over like a criminal on I-10. I clutched my machete from Belize, sharp but clumsy, useless against a bullet. Sleep was a stranger. Every sound was Dee's circling, his shadow lurking just beyond the glass. Dawn found him at our site, his words chilling. Where were you? I checked your tent." He'd prowled while we hid, a hunter sniffing out prey. We lied about the cave, our voices shaking. "No Chris," he said. We packed in a frenzy, fling his promise to meet us at Carlsbad Caverns. Lena's careless slip. We rerouted to Mess of Our Day, praying he wouldn't follow. Chris's sight was still empty, bike unmoved. The wild-eyed woman cackled, saying he'd been gone days, her shrines rattling like warnings. We sped east, the desert shrinking in the mirror, but not the fear. I'm certain Dee killed Chris, lured him to that trail and left him for the sands. We were next, his backpack a ticking threat. I've searched for him. Name, plate, anything. But he's a ghost, perhaps still hunting. The desert keeps its dead, but its whispers to the living. Trust your gut, or join the silence. The air in the Smoky Mountains hangs heavy this time of year, like a cloak that's been draped over the ridges and valleys for centuries, waiting for fools like us to stumble into its folds. It's our first anniversary, mine and Jake's, and we've been holed up in that cramped camper just outside Cherokee for what feels like an eternity already, though it's only been 8 days. The kind of place where the night swallows sound whole, leaving you with nothing but the creak of the pines and the distant howl of something that doesn't quite sound like a coyote. We're young, stupid with that newlywed glow, me at 21, him at 23, and we've always chased the ghosts of the forgotten, abandoned mills choked with kudzu, ghost towns where the wind whispers through shattered windows like it's got secrets to spill. Cemeteries, however, those are our favorite. Rows of crooked stones leaning into the earth like they're trying to burrow back into whatever's waiting below. We've heard about Connor's Cemetery from some faded forum post, tucked away like a dirty secret off Newfound Gap Road, maybe a mile and 9/10 from the Oconaluftee Center. Remote, the post said. Eerie. Perfect for us. The drive out there that afternoon was deceptively serene. Golden light slanting through the canopy, the road winding like a serpent's spine. But as we pulled into the gravel pull-off, the forest seemed to lean in. The trees weren't just tall, they hulked. Their branches gnarled into shapes that suggested claws frozen mid-swipe. No other cars, no hikers, just the two of us, stepping out into air that tasted of damp moss and something else. Something like old blood baked into the soil. The trailhead wasn't marked. No sign, no blaze, just a subtle breach in the underbrush where the world parted like flesh under a knife. We slipped in single file, me leading because I'm the one who spots the snares of the wild. Vipers coiled in the leaf litter, sinkholes disguised as innocent divots. Jake trailed a few paces back, his boots crunching softly on the needle-strewn path. The trail narrowed quickly, ferns brushing our legs like insistent fingers, and the light dimmed to that bruised purple of impending dusk, even though the sun was still clawing at the horizon. We hadn't gone far, maybe a quarter mile, when the air thickened, pressing against my chest like an unseen hand. Birds had gone quiet, no rustle of squirrels, no trill of insects, just our breaths, ragged and too loud. We paused there, in a small circle clearing where the path doglegged toward what the map swore was the cemetery. Jake's voice came low, almost a whisper, like he didn't want to wake whatever slumbered nearby. "Babe, look. Look at that statue." My heart stuttered. Statues in these old boneyards? Sure, maybe a weeping angel, moss-veiled and sorrowful, or a stern oblique etched with prayers long faded to ineligible scars. I scanned the undergrowth, squinting into the gloom. "Where?" He pointed, arm rigid, finger trembling, just enough to betray him. Up the trail about 20 yards off to the right, half shrouded by a thicket of rhododendrons that seemed to curl protectively around it, like the bushes themselves were complicit in hiding it from the world. It wasn't a statue, not in any sense I'd ever known. Towering there, easily 12 feet, maybe 15 feet, if you counted the antlers that forked upward like a crown of rusted iron spikes, was something. A form that mocked the grace of a deer or an elk, but twisted into a parody that clawed at the edges of sanity. Its body was elongated, unnaturally so. The legs splayed wide as if rooted in place by some ancient curse. The hide, if that's what it was, stretched taut over bones that shouldn't have fit together. Leather? Wood? It gleamed dully in the filtered light, preserved in a way that suggested oils and salts and rituals best not spoken out loud. The torso swelled in the middle, bulging as though something inside had grown too large and pressed outward, straining the seams. But the face, oh my God, the face. It wasn't equine, not mammalian in any clean way. A deer skull, elongated into a camel's snout, flat and lipless, nostrils flaring wide as open wounds, fused with a broad rack of an elk, eyes set too far apart, glassy orbs that caught the light and held it, unblinking. No fur, no velvet, just that leathery sheath, cracked in places like parched earth after a drought, revealing glimpses of something darker beneath. And the mouth, jagged, too many teeth crammed into a jaw that hung slack, as if mid-scream but silenced forever. I froze, my skin covered in goosebumps, as if 1,000 invisible eyes had turned on us. The air grew colder, a draft slithering up from the roots of the earth, carrying a scent like wet rot and incense, something ceremonial, profane. We'd scoured every corner of the internet before coming. TripAdvisor reviews, all trail logs, even those creepy Reddit threads about hidden smoky horrors. Not a whisper of this. No photo. No warnings. It was as if the thing had willed itself into existence, just for us, blooming from the forest's fever dream. Jake's hand clamped on my shoulder, fingers digging in like hooks. "I don't like it," he muttered, voice cracking on the edges. "We go now." No argument. We pivoted as one, hearts hammering a frantic tattoo against our ribs, and bolted back the way we'd come. Branches whipped at our faces, thorns snagging our jeans like desperate pleas to stay. Every snap of twig underfoot echoed like a gunshot in that suffocating silence, and I swear I felt it. Them watching. Not just the statue, but the woods themselves. The trees with their bark faces twisted in silent judgment. The shadows pulling deeper, hungrier. My mind raced with fragments of half-remembered Cherokee tales, skinwalkers that wore the hides of the slain, spirits bound to the bones of the betrayed. Was this one of them? A guardian for the graves we sought, offended by our trespass? We burst onto the road like birthed from a wound, lungs burning, and slammed into the car. I fumbled the keys, hands slick with sweat that wasn't just from the run. As we peeled out, gravel spitting like curses, I finally gasped it out loud. That didn't feel right. None of it did. Jake's knuckles were white on the wheel, his face ashen in the dashboard glow. He didn't look at me, eyes fixed on the rear view like something might lunge from the tree line. It blinked, Sarah. I'm not shitting you. Those eyes, they fluttered like it was waking up. And the ear. He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing like a noose. The right one. It moved. Not flicked. Spun. Full circle. Like a goddamn owl. But wrong. 360 degrees. Slow. Like it was scanning for us. My blood turned to ice water. I'd seen something else in that face. Not a blink, but a shift. A ripple under the hide, as if muscles long atrophied were flexing, testing their chains. And the body, elk haunches warped with a camel's hump, sloping into haunches that ended in hooves split too wide, splayed like hands grasping at the air. It hadn't moved, not overtly, but there was a tremor, a vibration humming through the ground like I felt it in my soles, up my spine, like it was breathing, waiting. The drive back to the camper blurred into a haze of paranoia. Every curve in the road conjured illusions, antlers in the peripheral, eyes glinting in the dusk. I kicked myself for not snapping a photo. What kind of evidence is a story without proof? But deep down I knew. Some things resent the flash of light, the click of capture. They fester in the unseen. That night, safe, or so we told ourselves, in the camper's tin walls, we fired up the laptop and dove into the digital abyss. Forums, blogs, digitized Cherokee lore. Connor Cemetery, a smattering of mentions. Pioneers buried in the 1800s, land stripped from the tribe in trails of tears that still wept underground. No statues, no anomalies, just echoes of displacement, of blood soaked into the soil. We cross-referenced coordinates, pored over satellite images that showed nothing but green smear. Hours bled into midnight. The screen's glow casting our faces into spectral blue, and still nothing. As if our eyes had conjured it from the ether, a hallucination tailored to our trespass. Exhaustion clawed at us, but sleep was a traitor. I lay there in the dark, Jake's arm heavy across my waist, listening to the woods encroach. The camper rocked gently, not wind, but something brushing the sides, probing. Whispers? No, just the rustle of leaves, but in the spaces between, a low rumble, like stones grinding in a forgotten mill. I dreamed of it that night. That thing, its hide splitting to reveal not flesh, but roots, tendrils snaking toward me, wrapping my ankles, pulling me under to join the graves we'd never reached. Morning came, gray and grudging, the sky bruised with clouds that promised rain but delivered only mist. We needed answers, something to anchor the dread coiling in our guts. The Native American bookstore in town, Eagle's Wing, tucked into a strip of shops that catered to tourists with dream catchers and turquoise, had felt welcoming on our first visit. The older woman behind the counter, with her silver braids and eyes like polished bowling balls, sharing stories of the old ones without a hint of salesmanship. We went back, the bell above the door tinkling like a warning. She remembered us, the newlyweds with the curious hearts, she called us then. We spilled it all in hushed tones, the words tumbling out like confessions in a confessional stained with sin. The trail, the clearing, the thing that shouldn't be. Her face didn't blanch. It hardened, lines etching deeper as if we'd disturbed a scar. She poured us bitter tea that steamed with herbs I couldn't name, its scent sharp as pine sap and regret. "Spirits of the displaced," she murmured, finally, voice a gravel whisper that seemed to draw the shadows in the shop closer. "Not all that walks these woods wears moccasins or fur cleaned from the hunt. Some are stitched from the remnants, the hides of the hunted, the bones of the buried. Connor, that's old ground. Blood cries out there from when the white man's road carved through our veins." She leaned in, her gaze pinning me like a specimen. "You saw what it allowed. Sometimes they choose their witnesses, show themselves to remind you. This land remembers. It hungers for balance." My throat tightened. "What do we do?" She glanced toward the window, where the mountains loom like silent judges. "The visitor center. Ask the rangers, quietly. They know the stories the maps don't hold. But heed this. If you go back..." Her paws stretched heavy as fog. "Don't call to it. Don't name it. And if it moves again, run until your lungs bleed. Because what you saw, it wasn't dead. It was resting." We thanked her, the words ash on our tongues, and fled to the camper like chastened children. The day dragged each hour a tightening noose. Jake paced, muttering about optics and exposure, half joking about it being a prank, some trail cam artist gone rogue. But his eyes darted to the windows, and when he thought I wasn't looking, he traced the door's locks with trembling fingers. Me? I couldn't shake her words. Chosen. Why us? What debt did our blood owe this place? These woods that had watched generations rise and rot. Now, as twilight bleeds into the ink black again, I'm humped over this keyboard, the camper's single bulb buzzing like a trapped hornet. Outside, the trees murmur, secrets in a tongue of wind and wing beats. Jake's asleep, or pretending to be. His snores ragged, broken by twitches that make me wonder if he's running in his dreams. We've packed for tomorrow. Notebooks, recorder, salt from the glove box, because why the hell not? The visitor center first, to sift through their archives for whispers of similar sightings. Deer things with camel faces, ears that wheel like cursed millstones, hides and breathes, and then back into the mall to see if it's still there, rooted in its vigil, or if it's wandered closer, drawn by the echo of our flight. Part of me screams to burn the map, to flee this haunted honeymoon and never look south again. But the pull is stronger, a morbid gravity whispering that we weren't meant to see, that ignoring it would only invite it to follow, to slink through the underbrush on silent hooves, its eyes spinning in the dark, waiting for us to sleep. We've lived this life forever, Jake and I, born to the South's slow simmer, small towns where the woods are playground and predator both, deer hunts at dawn, creeks thick with crawdads, nights under stars that prick like accusations. We know the wild's teeth, twisted fawns from bad winters, rabies ravaged does with foam-fleeked maws. But this? No disease warped it. No CWD glaze in those eyes. No limp in its stance. It was deliberate, engineered by hands long turned to dust. Or worse, by the land itself, weaving flesh from fury. If you've heard the tales, the skin-sewn guardians, the elk spirits of the Nunchi who punish the unworthy, please share away. Before we step back in, before it decides we're no longer just witnesses, but supper. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these True Backwoods Creepy Stories. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the rest of the membership of BackToAshes. Thank you all for your dedicated support. I can't put words into it, so as I always like to say, without you, I wouldn't have a voice. This channel would not exist, and I would be sitting here speaking to the void. So thank you for remaining by my side through this awesome journey and keeping the BackToAshes family just that. I appreciate you. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these selections. Until next time, please stay vigilant and take care of yourselves. I will be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.